Hello everybody and welcome to my panel all about Shin Megami Tensei V pre-hype. I am your host Spencer Presley. I do a weekly SMT Atlas and Persona Gabathon called Shin Megami Tensei Network, so if you enjoy this in a much more lonely setting on a podcast form or in Discords or whatever, you can look it up like that. But yes, we are here at NakaCon. We're wrapping it up in the most anime way possible by talking about Shin Megami Tensei V coming out for the Nintendo Switch on November 12th, 2021. I always have to remind myself it's not 11/11 because Japan got the really good release date and we have to wait like an extra day, but come see, come saw. Just out of curiosity for everyone in here, by the way, thank you all for coming here, so it's not just like me doing this by myself, which I probably would have done. Who's first SMT, like proper Shin Megami Tensei, who's going to be their first one with 5? So, for all of you kind of going into it, I was curious, like, what was, like, a big appeal for you? Like, it was like, oh, I've checked out Persona, I liked other games, it's a Switch exclusive. Like, what was kind of, like, the big appeal for you guys going into it? Yeah, you have a very specific taste. I like Switch games, Unreal Engine 4 RPGs, and they have to only be made in Japan. Which, I mean, there's not that many other good examples of Unreal 4 games on Switch, but hey, there we go. In case anyone here is not aware, we're not going to go through every game because that would be horrifyingly long. Hello, other people. Thank you for coming in. What the heck is a Shin Megami Tensei? Or as my dad likes to call it, when I showed my dad the spelling of Shin Megami Tensei, I think like probably 10 or 15 years ago, he unironically just blurted out like, why is it, like, he like just thought, no waiting, no thought. He was like, oh, it's shitty mega titty. Like, no, you're adding so many extra words here, but I will now never forget those words for the rest of my life. But yes, what is a Shin Megami Tensei? Shin Megami Tensei is actually not the first game in the series. If you want to be super accurate comic book nerdy guy, they are a follow-up to Megami Tensei, which released in the 80s. There was the first one, the second one, there's a whole OVA. We're not going to get into multimedia. We're mostly talking about 5 here because that would be like a 3-hour panel. But there's a long history there. So they were Japanese-only games released in the 80s for Megami Tensei. Well, a lot of these are going to be Japanese-only games, pretty much up until we get to Nocturne. But basically, the whole thing with the game series has always been about, it is a JRPG, sometimes dungeon crawling, monster and demon collecting, negotiating with them, and a really, really heavy focus on different mythologies, different gods, deities, and demons in a way that you don't normally get. Like, obviously, you can look at something like a Pokemon and be like, oh, that's really interesting, that's an original design. Or even something like a Yokai Watch of, oh, I'm taking something that's based in Japanese mythology and putting a more kind of childlike twist on it. But I've always really appreciated myself for Shin Megami Tensei that it's like, okay, if something's really fucked up in mythology, we're going to show it to you as really fucked up. Like the fact that, how many kids do you think grew up watching Disney's Hercules? Like, Zeus is awesome. All he does is like, he pals around, he's checking out for his son, he's doing awesome things. And then you look up Zeus in actual mythology, like, no, he's banging everyone, turning into animals and banging everyone. Like, so we need equal representation of these horrible, sometimes people, sometimes penis-shaped monsters, which I appreciate. So, along with having awesome representations of different mythologies, and it's great too because I think it's really easy, especially in Western and Eastern culture, of Greek mythology, really big. Ancient Japanese mythology, really, really big. But like, there's such a huge swath of other nationalities, like different mythologies and other things like that. Something we'll talk about later. Like SMT5 even has something from like Filipino like mythology and stuff with like their demons and stuff like that, which is just awesome. It's like we're getting to a point now where in the same kind of roster of a game, you can have something like Jack Frost next to a Zeus or an Odin, a Loki, or even next to like a Mara or any other weird boob or vagina monster. But they're not all boob and vagina monsters, just those are the funniest ones to post online. There's a lot of like really cute ones. But yeah, so the other thing about the stories that's always been really interesting with Megami Tensei they've always been very focused on having choice, even though what's actually really funny is, and can kind of be viewed as a criticism, is they're not actually like choose your own adventure games. You're not going into Law and getting a completely different game. You're not going into Neutral and picking a different game, or Chaos is giving you something totally crazy. It's normally going along a very similar route, and all the way up until the end, getting different kind of twists and turns, but by the end of it, either you're saving the world or the world's imploding or resetting, and that's just kind of like the key of it. But it's mostly more interesting of like the setup, who you are, what you're doing, and hopefully the cast, but the cast is usually kind of a mixed bag of if it's going to be good or bad. And the other one is just an amazing soundtrack. I know a lot of people like to give Persona, and rightfully so, Persona a lot of credit for their soundtracks with stuff like 3, 4, and 5, but even going back to those classic games like Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2 on the Super Nintendo have absolutely certified banger soundtracks. And to this day, what's really funny is I do a lot of stuff on YouTube a lot more recently talking about stuff like this. If you use newer tracks, like from even like say newer Persona games, Shin Megami Tensei 3, 4, and even 5, you're probably not going to get flagged very harshly. 1 and 2, they will get you right away. That pixel music, like they are going to steal all 5 cents I was maybe going to make on YouTube, and they are very hungry for it. So people are following that. Music copyright demons are gobbling everything up, as they rightfully should. And while a lot of the games have many similarities, even with stuff like the spin-offs and different sub-series, no timeline. I don't know if anyone in here is a timeline defender. If you want to, please, we can have a 9-hour discussion about it. But I think it's always really funny that people look at some series of like, okay, what's the timeline? How do things connect? Like, I need 1 to make sense to 5. And what's nice about it not having to really be a timeline or even really any relative thing is you can recommend any game in almost any space to anyone. So like if I know someone might like Nocturne because it's 3D, they don't have to play 1, 2, and If. They can just jump into Nocturne and go into something like that. Or if I think, oh, Strange Journey is something very kind of out there with its Antarctic setting, almost like kind of like Lovecraftian, like sort of setup for a story, you can just dive in and do something like that. And again, going back to 5 is going to need no knowledge. You don't even need to play Persona. You don't even need to really know RPGs. It's going to give you a fresh slate, and you can jump into it all clean and enjoy the experience, which is really, really nice. And while obviously there are connections, and you'll see things like similar demons or maybe even similarly named characters and things like that, it's never really been the focus. Like, you're not going into a Final Fantasy game, and if Sid is not the same Sid in the last one, it doesn't ruin the experience. So even though this is a very long series, even though we're only up to number 5 and it's almost like 30 years old, it is just one of those great things to remember. While there are tons of games, the order almost never matters. Unless there's a 2 in the title, like a sub-series 2, not actually Shin Megami Tensei 2, which now makes it sound really confusing, but like look at 4. 4 has Apocalypse. I would not say play Apocalypse before 4. You could. It would just kind of be like, man, this world sucks. I wonder how that happened. But for the most part, go with it as you will. And this is just like normal Shin Megami Tensei. There is other spin-off series besides even Persona. There is the very, very highly acclaimed Digital Devil Saga games on PS2. There are Devil Survivor on 3DS. See, there's just too many, then you get to the point of having like brain rot overload. But yeah, even ones that we haven't had in the West come out, like Majin Tensei is literally just like old Super Nintendo Fire Emblem meets Megami Tensei. And you could say, oh, that sounds great. I wonder why they've never done it. It has a bunch of flaws and it's a really slow, boring game, but hey, it exists out there for if you like. But it's kind of nice that it's like you don't have to play all of them, but it is one of those fun things of the more you learn about this series, the more it kind of like gives back to you. Like, it is a very satisfying series to kind of dive deep into, and really, it's a really easy internet rabbit hole to get into, even of games that we'll probably never get. Oh my God, how did I forget this? Devil Summoner. Devil Summoner is an amazing game. Does anyone actually, by chance, has anyone here, like, just because I'm needing an excuse to give one of these posters away, who here knows what the first Devil Summoner released on in terms of game platforms? Yes. Get your poster. There you go.
Thank you.
No problem. Alrighty, so, as we're going on, what is Shin Megami Tensei V. So, besides having a way too bangable protagonist, it is a Atlus-developed JRPG, exclusively for the Switch, with like a little asterisk next to that, because I've told a lot of people this recently. It's like, it's an exclusive, but at the end of the day, it's a third-party exclusive. So right now, in the things that I've basically been told, it's a year exclusivity, but Atlus is also really bad about caring to bring it to other platforms unless they're super, super financially viable. I don't see 5 selling poorly. So if you are someone out there, I don't know, actually, just curious, is anyone here like holding out for SMT5 to get a Switch, or I assume everyone in here has a Switch or knows someone with a Switch to play it on? So you're just waiting just for this, and then you're going to dive in? See, you're the person that then they're going to announce in a month or a week from now a special limited edition system just for SMT5, and then you're going to be laughing all the way to the bank while all of our suckers are buying the second system. So, yeah, it's coming out exclusively for the Switch, and I think I put this up next. Releases on November 12th, 2020. 2021 is the year we're in. Jeez, man. I was waiting for the day I'd make a really bad typo in any of these, and we finally found it, only on, like, slide 3. 2021 is when it comes out, so 11/12/21. And it is happening 8 years, actually over 8 years from the release of Shin Megami Tensei IV on the Nintendo 3DS, which obviously there have been various games that came out along the way there for it, but for the team at Atlus, they are a very kind of small group of developers. They basically have their spin-off teams, their mainline teams, and then a couple of third parties they work with, whether it be like the Etrian Odyssey team or the Vanillaware teams and stuff for that. But the funny thing about how long it's been from 4 to this is just to kind of put in this time of like how different of a company Atlus is. Atlus was not owned by Sega, whereas they are now, and literally after the release of SMT4, they went bankrupt. For the longest time, actually, leading up to SMT4's development, for every major project, I think it was either before development started or right before it shipped out for release, the entire team at Atlus for the Shin Megami Tensei team would go out to the nearest shrine by their office, and they would pray for good luck and fortune. And the only game they never did that for was SMT4, which hilariously bankrupted the company. Even though the game was great, everyone loved Shin Megami Tensei 4 for the most part, and it sold pretty well. It's just Atlus as a company was in such financial straits at that time. They were like just very, very much in rough conditions. So, other weird one, this is the first worldwide release ever, unless I'm really, really bad at my job, for the series with almost any game. But the asterisk there is kind of weird because we have to be dumb comic book guy. This actually releases 11/11/21. See, I got that right. See the 21? Oh my god, who made this? So it releases a day early, kind of technically, but time zones are weird, and God knows reviews will be out earlier, and things will be all over the place. But for my next question, I wanted to ask, if you would like to win this poster at least, I'll ask that. What was the first Shin Megami Tensei game that released first in the West before Japan? Say a little louder? No. Jack Bros is close though, because that game took like no time to try. Yes. No, that actually took a really long time to come out, but a little later than both of those. It's a recenter one on the portable side of things. I will answer my own question and think of an easier trivia. Yes. Is it the what? No, we got the mobile ones late. It was very sad. Yes, you in the back. No, not that one either. It was Devil Survivor Overclocked. The re-release of Devil Survivor 1 on 3DS released first in the West, even though it had new content, voice acting, and all that other stuff. The weirdest reason for that, I think, was... because Japan got 2. Japan got 2 before we got the re-release of Overclocked, and they wanted to space out the releases a little bit. So in the same year, Japan got Devil Survivor 2 on DS and Overclocked on 3DS, so they were just trying to space it out by like a month or two. In Japan. Thank you, Slide. So back to SMT5. We've got our cast, which is made up of a bunch of characters who I will not be butchering their names, but for the most part, we don't really know that much about them outside of a lot of them have really cool and interesting character design, and I kind of wanted to show them off. So here we have our main protagonist, otherwise known as whoever the heck you want to name your protagonist. Really interesting design, especially with the school outfit. This is one of those rare cases where I think if I was a girl at this school, I'd be kind of mad because all the girl outfits look like super basic by design of all the guys with like the floral print. But this was a really interesting one, and here is our alter ego. I'll give a softball for the poster. Does anyone here know the name of our alter ego? No. Thank you. Get your poster. Got one poster left, so no pressure. There you go. Alrighty, so Nahabino is basically like our common writer alternative, we're super handsome fancy boy alternative, and everyone on the internet, I would hope, universally loves it as much as I do. Now, you may be asking, how did this hilarious pairing come to happen? Why are we such a hot blue-haired Dimmy Fiend knockoff Spirit Halloween version? Well, that is because we met this man up here who saved our life when we were transported into the alternative Tokyo. It's kind of all up in the air. Basically, you are a kid, you go to school in Tokyo, you are transported to maybe another dimension Tokyo, maybe an alternate world one, a timeline one. They're kind of all over the place. We don't really know exactly yet, but we also don't really want to know. So when we're in this world, we're a weak little alpha boy. We can't stand up for ourselves. We need a daddy to help us. This up here, this is our handsome daddy. He helps us out. And what he does is basically comes up to us very early on in the game, and he says, hey, give me your hand. I will protect you. I can give you the power of the gods you need to help rise up and protect yourself against demons. And that is how the being known as Nahabino is born, and your luscious blue hair exists. I just love to think like these two have hilariously short hair, and then they have like if you ever see anyone cosplaying Nahabino, you're just legally obligated to compliment their wig, I would hope. So next up we have, somehow not the same guy. This is the Prime Minister of Japan, and what's really interesting about this one is different voice actors, different characters. Look at those faces and hairs. You're going to tell me this story has nothing to do with either of these two being of the same or from each other? I don't believe it for a second. This is definitely probably this guy is Nahabino is my dumb fan theory, but also then how does a guy who's a fusion go into a fusion? Oh my god, is this just going to be Steven Universe? Is SMT5 just becoming Steven Universe, the game with fusions? I hope not. That'd be bad probably, but there might be musicals. Our next character, going back to what I was saying, here is our best space girl, space friend from school. Again, let's talk about the outfit. What's going on here? You get a jacket and a white with a little bit of blue? That's almost like offensively bad by comparison. Like the girls are getting robbed at this school. But she seems nice. She's got a smirk. We don't really know a whole lot about her along with the entire rest of the cast. We actually don't even know everyone's alignments. Now, normally, the last kind of example we can really say, because while I love Shin Megami Tensei IV, Shin Megami Tensei IV, even similarly with Nocturne, had a problem with the cast of being this. Walter and Jonathan and even Isabeau from 4, they're not people. I love them. They're not human beings. They are, I am law, I am chaos, I'm neutral. That is all they are. There's no extra characters, and if there are extra characters, I'm sorry, Navarre, we're going to kill you and you're going to be a ghost in the next game. You don't really get a lot of time to love and explore these characters because they're too busy being either your good representation, neutral representation, or bad representation. So I'm really glad that the cast in this has so far been much larger than I would have expected, and we don't have those clear-cut, oh, he's the good guy, he's the bad guy, she's the boring girl. So next up, we have this guy, and he is another one of your alternate classmates. Along with him, this is also Glasses Guy's sister, and what's really interesting about this for kind of more of the cast for it, and also going back into the world, is unlike Shin Megami Tensei IV and even with Nocturne, you're not trapped in this nightmare hell Tokyo. You are able to go back and forth between them. I don't know if it's at will, but we've been shown various shots of you going in between both realities. And I think that's really interesting, and I can also understand people being like a little pessimistic about it. I think Shin Megami Tensei has to straddle that line of it'll be interesting of the story progressing while going back and forth between realities, but I think it's pretty safe to say people don't want SMT5 to turn into Persona 5. We don't want to go to school. We don't want to, like not like saying that social links are a bad thing, but like we would like to forge character bonds in maybe a more nuanced conversation dialogue system way, as opposed to, you want a burger? I'm gonna get a burger. Well, I gotta go fight this demon, but I'll get a burger after I fight the demon. Like there's a time and there's a space and there's a series for that. And I hope, because my worry was when we originally saw the earliest part of this game is, oh cool, Tokyo is like a hallway, a bus station, and then you never look at it again, much like with Nocturne. So thankfully I've been proven wrong with that in that aspect for it, but outside of, I want to see how they handle Tokyo. I really, really want to see how we handle these character relations. I am really glad how many cutscenes we've seen so far, because Atlas, if anyone's been following their social media, has been flooding the internet with pretty much every day there's new demon footage for this game release. So if you want footage of this game, there is like at least a minute of new footage released every day up until the game's release. And let's get a couple more of our characters here. Oh, here's one that might be too hard, but I'm like super duper biased with her. So this lady was just revealed recently. Who knows this demon's name? I will let you answer if no one else wants to call dibs. Okay, do you know her name? Say it again? No, it is Nuwa. So Nuwa is based off a Chinese goddess, and she basically was like the representation of life. She can like basically create human beings out of clay. And what's kind of been so funny about her is how much of a force they've kind of like shown her with the newest trailer and everything for it. Here is apparently her bodyguard, or is always hanging around side her, and for like a week made us all think he was maybe Raito. But this is just another kind of force of more characters, because like this isn't just, oh, here's your other bad guy. This is someone who is with her all the time. This is her right-hand man. We've seen multiple scenes of them together, and even you able to fight each other. So again, going back to the whole thing of having a big cast is great. It's about using it. Kind of like a easier comparison or example would be like, look at the newest Suicide Squad. Of like, that movie has like 20-something characters. And yeah, like half of them die in the first like 20 minutes, but they use that large cast in interesting ways without typecasting and pigeonholing any of their character developments. Like, you can go into Suicide Squad hating Harley Quinn and still like that versions of Harley Quinn, because it's a different character and it makes its own expressions. So here we have another one of your central forces. Probably these two will be a force opposing each other. But again, I just want to like take a moment and give a super big shout out to Doi and everyone on the Atlas art team. I don't know how everyone kind of feels about this one. This is Doi's first time being the central art force for just this main major title. Doi has been around working on Atlas games for a really, really long time, and a lot of this team has even worked on stuff all the way up to like Persona 2. But having, I think, this be our first big break and the first major title without Kazuma Kaneko is really, really good. And probably, like, while a lot of SMT fans are really nostalgic for Kaneko's artwork and especially his art style for how many demons are still being used in all of the Atlas games from his original designs forever ago, I'm glad we're getting more artists stepping out, making new designs, redesigning old demons, and kind of just putting a different stamp on things while still making it have that kind of similar SMT mentality with it all. So next up, we've got Demons and Fusions. So if you all weren't aware, basically, in Shin Megami Tensei, along with recruiting demons, you can negotiate with them, get items, barter with them into battles quickly like that. But you can also fuse them together to make more powerful demons. So basically, when you go to the Cathedral of Shadows, you used to be met with old guy Mito, big old long beard, dark sunglasses, really cool guy, not here anymore. We thoughted him up. We got a 9-foot-tall mommy now. She is our Cathedral of Shadows person, and I'm going to be honest, this is an improvement. They know what we want to summon demons around. And the best part, just because why not make it really overdramatic and really stupid, when you're fusing demons, it's no longer I'm just selecting them and then I'm seeing them getting sacrificed and dying. You as Nahabino are playing the cathedral in the Cathedral of Shadows to sacrifice them to make, like, you're literally like Sophie, which, by the way, Sophia is the person in charge of this all. She's not doing anything. She's just sitting there with her 100-foot statue of herself next to her, watching you all do this, and it's It's like the best thing ever. I love it. It's very, very fun and very over the top. So here's a couple of the demons we can get, or at least that we've really seen. Obviously, like I said, we're getting daily demon reveals. I think we're up to like 75, 80 something now. All I know is people were really mad when they got to 69. It was not Mara. That was a bit of a blunder. So we've got Jack Frost here, who actually has been redesigned. If you notice, he's got a little bit more white accents and kind of gleam on his like icy texture and stuff for it. Next up, we have, I'm not going to try her name at all. I know what it is, but she's a very, very hard name to say. This was the Filipino-inspired demon. If you can't really tell, she is a half-bat detached torso, and her body with her butt is being very so eloquently censored behind Sophia here because I wasn't sure how nasty I wanted to get for the demon art. Next up, we have actually a really interesting interpretation of this character's... so this is a demon we've seen before in the past, but almost like pixie-ified. And what's kind of so funny about this one was we've actually known about this and has been pivotal to SMT games in the past of this character in mythology, but they're kind of uprooting it, still keeping it to its character, maybe not so in design. But what's been kind of interesting to note is that this character has been seen really early on in the game and is even prominent in the cover art of the game. So it's probably a safe bet to assume that she is going to kind of be like your intro demon pixie. So if you've played Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, Pixie is your first demon you're able to recruit because you don't even know what demon recruiting is. So you find a relatively small but potentially powerful demon who you will eventually, hopefully not sacrifice and make like a super demon towards the end of the game. And then we're just wanting to show off a couple more demon arts just because I'm a sucker for all of the arts in this game here. For any of you guys who are like longtime fans, are there any demons who've not been revealed for 5 that you're really, really excited about or hoping are getting announced, or would be like sad if they weren't included? So, kind of going back to some redesigns though, a really, really prominent one that's definitely a lot more different than people were kind of expecting. On the far left here, we have Angel, and if anyone here has played basically any SMT game over the last like decade, Angel was a long blonde-haired woman in just like BDSM attire. It was just like, give me a belt to cover my titties and butt, and then I'm all good, don't worry about it. And what's been so funny about this one is the redesign is so drastic, you would almost like not really expect it outside of the halo and the motif for it, but I really, really highly recommend if you go to the Atlas West account. They've been, I think maybe every week or so, they've had Doi posting in Japan and in English his thoughts on the character redesign. So talking about what I was going for with this, why I'm going in this direction, and kind of the aspect we're going for here. So with Angel's design, what's been kind of interesting is it actually really closely mimics the Angel design from Shin Megami Tensei 2, and kind of going back to that more like gothic horror look. And if anyone's like played like Bayonetta, it's like kind of going back to twisting mythologies and realities into certain aspects. Where it's like, yes, angels can be very angelic, but in almost more of history, they are almost just as horrifyingly portrayed as demons are in like hell mythology. So kind of going back to what we were talking about before, we have a tale of 2 Tokyos. So we are actually bouncing back and forth between these 2 different worlds that are somehow coexisting at the same time and are the same location but are drastically different. So when you're in on the left, this is the more like kind of post-apocalyptic looking Tokyo here. You are still visiting same locations. You're going and you're exploring around Tokyo. You're checking things out. And what's kind of been so interesting about this, and we haven't gotten to really see a lot of comparison, but I really hope that the game kind of doubles down on the fact that you're switching between worlds. Not really in terms of the design, but with like locations. It would be fun to be like, hey, let's see the school in the demon world. Let's actually have it like be more of an interesting thing. Let's go to a mall. Let's like, because we've seen stuff like highways and city streets and stuff like that, but kind of more getting out of like the familiar territory with dungeon designs of like, I don't want to do buildings. I don't want to go through a building hallway in a corridor for like 5 floors and I get out of a factory. Really kind of mess around with it. I like stuff that 4 did, but 4 was a little more scoped down in its presentation. But like Japan has got tons of parks. Tokyo's got crazy parks, underground passageways. Really like lean into that like fact of like like what makes Japan special if this is going to be in Tokyo. Even something as simple as like going to maybe like a red light district and like seeing like all the really creepy, weird demons who would be there in the like alternate version of that world. So next up, though, kind of talking about gameplay. Gameplay has a really, really big influence, at least UI-wise, by one specific Atlus game, and I'd be remorse not to do this. So if anyone wants to try and win the last poster, if you look to the top right in the middle image, what Atlus game is that UI really similar to? Yes. Can you get your poster, sir? Yeah, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is very heavily influenced by SMTV. And for me, I just noticed the Shantae shirt. Now I'm even more happy now. So the UI is very similar to Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which I hope you've played. If you've not played, or maybe you've heard, it's just a shitty SMT and Fire Emblem crossover, don't think of it as a crossover. It is legitimately one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It's really short at like 30 hours to do everything. Actually, no, that's not fair. Like 30 hours to do like the main story and side quests. Then if you want to like get 100%, it's like around like 40, 50. But super cheap on Switch, or if you want to be weird and play the Wii U version, there's the Wii U version. So its UI is very heavily inspired by it while still kind of keeping those aspects of the DS game. So obviously, this series has pretty much spent its last decade on a two-screen console. So how do you really display all of that information without kind of flooding everything while also not having to kind of reinvent the wheel? Because I think one of the hard things is when it comes to JRPGs is, especially if you're more of a regularly releasing series, having to change that UI for every title has got to be so hard of like, well, if you loved the last one, we can't just have it be the same as the last one. So I think having similarities with TMS is smart because it's like TMS had a lot of good ideas with its HUD, and its presentation was like poppy, made sense really clearly without cluttering the screen, but also at the same time having to convey that extra information that you can't actually show. So if you're looking at battles for Shin Megami Tensei V, you'll actually notice it rarely, if ever, will show all of the demons you're fighting and all of the demons in your party. And that's actually just part of the concession behind the game being made on Unreal Engine 4. Unreal Engine 4, probably, I guess, most well-known for being made by the Fortnite developers, has been this really awesome tool that developers have used to create games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Kingdom Hearts 3, Tekken 7, Street Fighter 5. It's a very versatile engine for whether it be like something like a Fortnite or even something like Dragon Quest XI. And what's been so nice about it is I was so worried because Switch is, not a controversial thing to say, the least powerful system on the market right now. And the last thing people really want is for this game, especially after such a long delay, to be kind of restricted in terms of how good it might look or how good it might play or the features it wants to do. Because for the longest time before we saw gameplay of this, I kept telling people, like, hey, set your expectations low. This was either going to be a game that graphically blew you away and had very underwhelming combat, or was going to be super solid combat but might be visually boring. And I'm glad that I was wrong in this situation, because the devs at Atlus really took their time, and one of the reasons this game took so long to come out was they had a lot of hard time nailing Unreal for what they wanted to do, of like, okay, what do I show without kind of losing anything? What's the right amount of stuff to keep on? How well can this look? And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just the art style or how they did it, but I think they found that perfect medium of, hey, we have a very distinct art style that really, this could probably be done on PS3 outside of the fact that it's on Unreal Engine 4. It's not like it's a photorealistic, like, graphical masterpiece showcase, but for what it's doing, it stands out. It's easily the best looking in the entire series, and I think if they keep it up with the characters, the locations, and the final execution, I'm in the camp of, like, everything I've seen, I'm like, I like the way this looks almost more than, like, Persona 5 at this point, but, like, something like Persona 5 I've been familiar with for almost 5 years now at this point. It's not really a super fair comparison, and they're very different art styles. So Going back, though, into the combat, one of the things that's interesting is obviously you can have your party of 4, you have Nahabino and your 3 demons. So far, we've seen no cooperation with your allies, but that's kind of a more similar thing we saw with 4, handled very badly, and much better with Apocalypse. And I'm hoping, though, that since we've seen so much of the characters in the story progression, that we at least have a way to kind of like team up with your party members in maybe at least in an assist move or way, because I always kind of hate that thing of you're having this moment, you're reunited with a friend, and then the screen breaks and you have a boss fight. But your friend you were just talking to has nothing to do with the boss fight. It's like, okay, thanks for just watching me like fight this cat demon for like an hour and not doing anything about it. And obviously in these situations, most of your friends are presumably human and presumably don't have any powers or things they could do, but Shin Megami Tensei is also in a world where like, hey, if you're not using a gun, you can pull out a gun. You can use like something crazy. Like you can find something that will use the equivalent of a fire spell on someone. So I'm excited to see how the battle system kind of changes with that. We obviously have the press turn system of basically, hey, if you hit a crit or if you hit a weakness on someone, you get to act again up to another 4 turns if you end up acting on that. The other thing that's interesting is if you look on the side here, that little red meter, if you can actually see it, it's a little more prevalent down here in the bottom right. That is a Magatsuhi meter. So basically, if anyone has played Shin Megami Tensei 3, one of the biggest things with Nocturne is this life force of Magatsuhi is something that is in all of us. It's literally like a dumb analogy, if you really want to dub it down, is like it's like the force in red blood energy form of like it gives people power, it gives things life, it gives things like purpose. And for the most part, what we've kind of seen is you can collect it through either collecting it in the world or by battling demons, and this is used for certain moves. Certain moves are requiring a certain amount of Magatsuhi. Basically think of it like final limits or EX attacks and things like that if you want to simplify it. And then going back to with the Demon Negotiation. Demon Negotiation is still here, thankfully, and one of the best parts about it is kind of watching it evolve over the years. If you've played something like the first Shin Megami Tensei, and even in more recent examples, maybe with like Nocturne HD, it's never always been the most crystal clear. And I think you have to strike that weird balance with negotiating with demons of like, you don't want it to be easy because then it's not going to be satisfying. But if it's overly vague, then it's frustrating and people don't want to do it and they might not use it. Because obviously you could beat an SMT game without negotiating with demons very easily. You would just have a much more different experience than was intended for you. So Demon Negotiation, I'm really excited and hoping that the localization team, because it's also got to be extra hard because the team in Japan is making this with Japanese in mind of giving each demon, like there's over 200 demons in this game, a personality of, even if it's just a couple of sentences, that you can hopefully suss out enough to then decide, okay, hey, this guy is probably egocentric. This guy is probably very weak-willed or weak-minded or greedy. I should lean into these aspects to get them on my team or to give them a reason to give me money or kick me out of my battle. So we need to kind of see a little bit more of that, but for me, I actually have really enjoyed how Persona 5 kind of took that with give a little bit more of a hint, whether it be visual, suggestioning of like, make it so there's kind of like that nudge of like, hey, this guy's probably like this, and then you're using deduction of the options available to you. Because like, it's not like you're coming up with a sentence all on your own. It's like, if you're like told like, oh, this guy looks pretty shifty, or this guy looks kind of like a goody two-shoes, you can then use those answers to think of, okay, what would then the best choice be, as opposed to just looking at them. They give you one sentence about themselves, most of the time with no voice acting, and go, oh my god, what do I pick? So, thank you all for coming. That was basically me rambling for almost 40 minutes about a game that is not out yet, but the floor is yours if you guys have any questions or whatever you wanted to ask me or just voice your opinions. That is kind of it for the panel. Once again, thank you all for coming and listening to me ramble on the last day. I hope I did not bore any of you all too much, but yeah, thank you all for coming. I hope you had a good convention, and if SMT5 is going to be your first game, please enjoy it. If you got the collector's edition, consider yourself very lucky. That was a nightmare fuel of anyone trying to get. And yeah, if you enjoy listening to me rambling, less so in panel format, I do a weekly podcast and community called Shin Megami Tensei Network. You can just normally look it up by SMT Network, all stuff like that. But yeah, That's me. Does anyone else have anything they want to say or whatever? You are all hilariously quiet, and I appreciate you all for sitting through me babbling so much. Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your con, everybody.